Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race NTT INDYCAR Series at Detroit. Alex Palou going for 4 in a row. Can he make that happen? Formula One, they're at Barcelona, Spain. Spanish Grand Prix, starting front row. But today, boy, the same mistake Mercedes did, and having 2 cars out on that first lap. Joe Savriego here, along with Emily Sharp. We'll have Mark Castellano joining us for Formula One later in the program. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. Link in the video description to invest in us through Patreon and Buy Me Coffee YouTube Super Chat. We encourage everyone to participate in the chat room. Share your question, opinions with us, because Emily, we got to get started with IndyCar. And I think the big story that has been getting everybody sharing their opinions is what happened in practice, where we saw tempers flaring between Will Power, Kyle Kirkwood. Will Power gave Kyle Kirkwood a big push down a straightaway, just pushing him. And surprisingly, IndyCar officials say no action will be taken. Kyle Kirkwood and many others are unhappy with this call. Some calling it Penske favoritism at Detroit, which is, of course, Penske's home race. I know just moments ago, we had Nathan Brown from the Indy Star saying, circling back from last night, IndyCar has taken no actions against the number 12 for Power's contact on Kyle Kirkwood. And essentially, now the calls for independent officiating is just growing and growing. Does this give critics of IndyCar more evidence to chip away at Roger Penske's ability to manage the series and his team?
Well, first off, Joe, I'm really excited that we get to start with this segment just because I was telling you before we came on the air, I am gassed up and ready to talk about this. I think this is honestly totally wild and inappropriate that we've had no action by IndyCar officials. I know we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about this on this morning's program, but if you go back and you listen to the audio of Will Power, you can hear him accelerating. And so him just kind of laughing it off after practice run concluded yesterday and kind of giggling and being like, well, he was there anyway, so I figured I'd just push him anyways and create a gap. Totally inappropriate. I can see that he was trying to laugh it off, but quite surprised that even in the commentary box with Townsend Bell, he was laughing it off as well. James Hinchcliffe seemed a little bit more, part of the initial group that had that outcry of saying how unsafe this was. So I'm sorry, I'm already like going on a tangent because I'm so worked up about this. But to answer your original question, call me a critic of the lack of fair investigation happening, because this is just totally inappropriate. I cannot believe just less than 2 weeks from the attenuator gate in Indy, that we've had something visibly inappropriate, and I'm sorry, I can't think of a different word, happen again involving a Penske car, and there be no response, truly none. And initially yesterday, Kyle obviously kind of again laughed it off and saying we're in P1, so I don't really care. But his car sustained so much damage. I can't imagine that if Will was in this position, that there would have been the same response, or lack thereof. So obviously, I want to punt it over to you, because like we were chatting before we came on the air, it shocking, I would say.
Very shocking. You bring up a good point. If roles were reversed, we know Will Power has a temper. I remember Scott Dixon and Will Power accidentally collided in the Road American, and Will Power was pushing and shoving and saying words we cannot say on the air to Scott Dixon. If roles were reversed, you just know Will Power will be running to Kyle Kirkwood's team. He might even try to give him a bump if Kyle Kirkwood's trying to get by. So this was very over the top. It doesn't belong in IndyCar. This is not NASCAR where we hear the term the chrome horn giving them bumper, because Kyle Kirkwood's team, they had to fix that damage from it. I don't know what kind of cosmetic damage that may have done to Will Power's nose. Not that much, but this was just very disappointing from a series level of we're not going to do anything. Because if this was a more polarizing driver like a Santino Ferrucci, everybody's coming after Santino for doing that. If this was a rookie, we're going to be talking about this is a learning curve for the rookie. Will Power's a 2-time champion. He knows better than to do something like that. And his temper got the best of him. He should get a penalty. You cannot allow this. It's just very disappointing. And just coming off after everything with the attenuator mess, the Indy 500, Doug Bowles saying we're going to get independent officiating. I think that is just going to cry louder and louder. And here we are in Detroit, which is the home race of Roger Penske. He put together this race. He's done so much for Detroit. This is just very bad look and really just puts the tire sports in a negative light. And I guess it goes back to, we know this track we talked about on the Women Motorsports program yesterday, Emily. There's very little room to move out of the way. It's very narrow. Last year, we saw Kyle Kirk against Santino Ferrucci, in fact, get a bit physical in pit road when the two of them made bumping. Now, of course, that was very minor compared to what Will Power did, but Power, I think it's pretty unanimous. He should get this penalty. Do you have any hope or something maybe later on IndyCar is going to revisit it and say, Will Power, here's a penalty? Because clearly that move was something to be penalized over.
Yeah, and I think everyone can tell that I agree with you. I think there should be a penalty. Interesting dialogue with Hinchcliffe saying like, what would that penalty even be? To me, it's pretty clear that it would have been avoidable contact at a minimum. But I do want to just follow up with something that you've just said. Last year, we obviously saw Santino Ferrucci and Kyle Kirkwood get into it, and obviously Ferrucci has a very feisty personality, and I think that you either love him or you hate him. Obviously, our viewers know that I loved him and I was rooting for him to have a strong Indy 500 outing last week. But again, to your point, had he done this again to Kyle Kirkwood or Will Power in this era that we're coming off of back to back very scandalous moments, um, man, the uproar that would be felt around the grid, around this IndyCar community. But I do think that there is a bit of favoritism that Will Power, two-time champion, we can all just kind of giggle it off of like, oh, like, look how ridiculous this is. This is so unbelievable. I just have to kind of laugh at it. So my hope is that people like us will get vocal today. I'm usually not an advocate for the social media warrior, but I think this is a terrible look for IndyCar. This series is in danger. I mean, to be quite frank, and it's nothing new about that. Ratings have historically been declining. Obviously, we had a very strong outing with viewership for last week's Indy 500, but this is not what this series needs. From the attenuator, with the most recognizable IndyCar team on the field, to then the follow up of the Marcus Ericsson penalties and the Andretti penalties of last weekend, following the conclusion of the Indy 500 race, and now this. And this is something that you don't have to know what an attenuator is. You don't have to understand what rules an Andretti car is breaking about not being in regulation. This is visibly unsafe driving, and for there to be no action, it is incredibly disappointing. And my hope is that people will also speak up, and maybe we can get the attention of these IndyCar officials to see the negativity surrounding that. Once again, despite firing Tim Cindric, there's been an awful decision being made that's truly going to be to the detriment of the series as a whole. I'm so gassed up. Sorry, Joe. Back to you.
Well, that's the thing. There are a ton of good people working at IndyCar, from the media center where we've been there. We know those folks. The promoters like Green Save Reed, the Long Beach folks that organize that race. There's so many people that love this series, and that goes down to the media. We love it. The media that shows up week in and week out of these races, they love IndyCar because of competition. Like you said, this is something to be vocal about. I mean, when I see websites saying this is clearly bias, not having any penalty. Under no circumstances I could see anybody else getting away with this. I mean, there's been plenty of times we've been on the air saying race control gave a penalty for this person for avoidable contact. Was that avoidable contact or hard racing? And this was not even racing. This was practice. No point in it. I mean, I just cannot. Just the thought that okay, we got the situation with IndyCar now. I'm have faith in that Doug Bowles, who says he's working on it, is working on it because I know it's not as simple as okay, you all are now our independent officiating team. Go out there and do a good job. That could just as well end up a little bit disastrous. I mean, people got to remember what USAC officiating of the Indy 500 used to be and what caused the IRL then to bring their own officiating. There's so much work IndyCar has to be done, and I think they cannot just say everything's fine. We got great racing. Even that's debatable. People are saying, look at what the hybrid unit is doing. I think it was Pato Award that just in that recent article criticizing it has made the racing worse. Get rid of it. You think of the past history of a Honda where I believe it was in CART where there was the pop-off valve issue with Honda. CART didn't do anything. Then Toyota, well, we're leaving for the Indy Racing League, and then Honda follows suit. And there's rumors Honda is being eyed by NASCAR. So this series, I think Roger Penske, if he's not going to make the call, hopefully Doug Bowles or somebody very trusted tells Roger, look, we need to do a lot to fix the credibility of this. Let me guide this if you don't want to. And here's what I'm going to do. Because I think that's what IndyCar really needs when it comes to that. Emily, do you feel like this is something where this is just building a critical mass point to Roger, do something drastic and not just say, I'm sorry to Jamie Little again?
Yeah, absolutely. This independent investigative team needs to happen. It like there was a week. I understand that it takes time for things to actually be implemented, and it's all fine and dandy for us to be talking about it here behind my computer screen. But there was a week, 2 weeks since that attenuator gate that I've lovingly referred to it as now. Um, to this week, and it's not enough to have an independent governing body to look into these infractions at the end of the season. It needs to happen now. This is I don't know how else to say it. I agree with you, Joe. I think people that have been watching IndyCar, um, as long as many of us have seen the decline of popularity in the sport, which obviously at the end of the day is a business. And if there is a decline in fans and seats and people watching it on television, the sport is in danger, and it something needs to happen. And I remember that feeling of almost relief when, Roger bought the series and the Speedway. And as someone, obviously people know that I'm down the street from the Long Beach Grand Prix. And again, a sense of relief because that race has even, it's the second most popular race on the schedule. And that race has had danger associated with it continuing, as well as someone who has full awareness of the reality of what's going on in Long Beach. So there was a sense of relief that Penske came in and, almost saved these, and it's now to the detriment of the sport that these blatant things are going unchecked.
Yeah, a lot of issues, and that sense of relief of wow, Roger's gonna run it. Penske Perfect's coming to IndyCar and Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Has there been improvements to the speedway itself? Yes, I think that's been a great thing. There's been some improvements, but boy, there's just been some aspects that I feel have in a way felt neglected and just now it's starting to show its head of okay, this issue with the officiating, this issue with the cars being old, this rush to get hybrid units. Your guys were late. Now the racing product, the drivers are vocal. I mean, just even last year, the Pato Who comment and missing out on being in Mexico. I will give Will Power credit for Daffer on the press conference saying we should be in Mexico, not NASCAR. And that wasn't fun for Roger to probably hear that, but kudos for Will last year for saying that in the chat room. Adam, I think IndyCar needs to go do what they used to compete at. I love to see New Hampshire, Berkman Airport, Cleveland, etc. More tracks are always great. Definitely, I think the ovals, especially Michigan, New Hampshire, that's two great ovals. We'll see what happens. The on track action, I think with this hybrid year, it may not improve right away, but if we have more
Mm.
oval races, more new tracks, that could give some hope to fans and show progress is being made. Of course, Detroit, Emily, this is a fairly new track. Overall, we've seen it become a lot of caution. Last year, this race had 8 cautions. The year before, 7 cautions. So we know qualifying is going to be important. It's very tricky to pass, very little room. But there's the odd factor of this side-by-side pit road, which I'm personally not a fan of. I know it visually looks great when they all come together. Thankfully not colliding, but just towards the middle of the pit road. But it just looks so bizarre to me. And when you look at the front of the pit road, as it goes by last week's results, of course, you have Alex Palou leading one side of pit road. On the other side, Lil Dave Malukas. So towards the back, very back, you have, of course, the 3 drivers qualified from the Indy 500. Kyle Kirkwood, Marcus Ericsson. And then you have the Penske drivers, Scott McLaughlin, Joseph Newgarden. They're going to be in a very packed pit row surrounded by those drivers. Throw in there, of course, Robert Schwartzman, who had a DNF, Rinus VK, who had a DNF. Could a crowded pit road hurt McLaughlin and Newgarden's race chances?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And based on the first couple of practices, the Andretti teams actually are looking pretty fast. Ericsson not as much of a presence as Kyle Kirkwood and Colton Herta. But Kirkwood, as we mentioned at the top of the show, he was leaving FP1 in P1. So very fast cars. Pit position is everything. I think the theme, if you can take my mood that I'm in currently as an indicator, I feel like the theme of this weekend between Barcelona and Detroit is going to be aggression because ultimately that's what it's going to take to get these overtakes done. Detroit is an incredibly narrow track. We saw so many cars going off into the runoff areas just in the practices. I think we're going to talk about a little bit later about the amount of cautions that we predict that we're going to see, but I definitely think that we're going to see several this weekend. So having a good pit strategy and pit exit, entry and exit is going to be key. We saw obviously Colton Herta last year have really a disastrous strategy race and weather impacted him. So anything and everything will make these drivers' lives difficult, especially for these drivers that could be on the path of having a good day. So, I really quickly want to say to Adam, I miss Belle Isle. I wish they would bring that back. The narrow walls of the streets of Detroit certainly make things interesting, but I miss Belle Isle. Belle Isle. I wish we would go back there.
Yeah, I feel the same with Belle Isle. Like, if we could go back there, my opinion was better racing. Yes, I know the bragging rights. Oh, we're in downtown Detroit, proper downtown Detroit. Yeah, but I mean, just this racing and the cautions are going to come out. You could easily be trapped. And ready, they always are pretty good, especially Colton Herta on street course, just putting that together. I just think they're going to be in for a long day, McLaughlin and Newgarden. You could
Yeah.
qualify up front, but if we have a caution and you make your pit stop and you're up front, and then here comes the person that's pitting ahead of you, they're going to block your entry. Oh, it's going to be a long day for them and just not exactly a fun day. And coach qualifying is that most important factor of the weekend, being up front. But if we're anticipating the cautions, you could inherit the lead if You stay out. Here comes that caution. You pit, fine and dandy. Now you're all of a sudden the race lead, and whoever pitted before the caution, they're going to be stuck in the back. We've seen it happen in St. Petersburg, other street courses, the road courses, all the time. But the lack of cautions this year, I mean, when we look at it, St. Petersburg first lap mess, okay. But then there was no caution up until the Indy Grand Prix, and that was again one caution, little Dave's car rolling to a halt. Indy 500, that's a different animal. What are your thoughts since this is such an unforgiving track?
Yeah.
Are we going to see that trend continue of, I'm going to say, 5 or less cautions, or do we see 5 and more cautions?
There's no way in my mind that we're seeing less than 5 cautions. I mean, if practice was any indicator, we could throw a yellow just for one of these cars spinning off into the runway area and having an unsafe re-entering the track. Pato in the second practice went into a tire wall, and he was looking pretty strong in the first practice. So it's, to your point, Joe, an incredibly unforgiving track. Um, if I had to put like a number, yes, Adam, we miss it. Maybe we can get 2 things done today: a willpower penalty and an Isle Bell resurgence, Bell Isle resurgence. I if I had to put money to it, I think last year, if I recall correctly, we had like 8 cautions on that race. So I would guess that we would be close to 8 to 10 cautions this year, minimum. But yeah, it's gonna be, I mean, and those turns are so tight. Turn 3 is so tight. It's something that we haven't talked about yet, Joe, is that they moved the restart area to
Mhm.
the front straightaway instead of the back straightaway. So that's a whole new unknown factor. Obviously, the initial green flag drop will start in the same place, but during these restarts, how is that going to look? How is that going to impact? Do we get an immediate back-to-back caution? So I don't know. What do you think about that?
It's sort of, I'm glad you brought that up. It sort of reminds me of the old restart zone we had at the first year of the Nashville Street Course. Of course, we all remember the Nashville Street Course. That's where Marcus Ericsson on the restart didn't slow down, went over Sebastian Bourdais, and then he still goes on to get the win because of another caution coming out and he playing the caution game right.
Yeah.
Uh, I feel like this Detroit track is like that. Less cautions than that Nashville one, that street course. As much as they tried to make it work, I feel it was just some parts of it were just too narrow, too close, and those restart zones were not that great. Where here, I think is even to a bigger extent is just really unforgiving. I'm just curious to see how everyone's gonna play out with the restarts because I will not be surprised if we get a first lap caution. I mean, you have 27 cars side by side. There's no way they're gonna complete that. It's only gonna take one person, gets a little wide, push a person to the tire barrier, and you're gonna have 3 or 4 cars stack up and then the track block. That's what's gonna happen. IMSA is gonna be running today, and we've seen clips of those IMSA crashes at Detroit. This track is just, I know they wanted to make it work. Boy, they really pushing
Yeah.
it to make it work. Some would say it's not working with these cautions, but I think the way it is, we're easily looking at 5 or more. I will maybe with the hybrid, the more weight, just gonna probably compound the problem. We might have more cautions as we everybody knows it's so hard to pass. I gotta make this first corner on the restart work, and then mayhem ensues. So that'll be really interesting. Of course, 2 drivers not wanting the mayhem. Last year's winner, Scott Dixon, he's been having horrible qualifying luck. He needs to have a good qualifying run. And of course, his teammate who won here the first year, Alex Palou, going for 4 in a row. Oh my goodness. If he gets 4 in a row, I think it's just okay. Start engraving his name in the championship trophy unless he has the most disastrous second half of the season. Overall, do you feel those 2 are the favorites out there for this weekend, or is there other drivers that standing out? I know you mentioned Andretti already.
Yeah, and I'm just looking up to see where Scott, so obviously this is just practice, but Scott Dixon, 18th in the first practice and 11th in the second practice. So he is just once again not having a super strong start to his weekend. Obviously, Scott Dixon does Scott Dixon thing. You can never count this man out. But to your point, qualifying is everything. He had a pretty decent starting place last year that really put him in the right place to take that win. Um, so between the two of them, I think Alex Palou is going to be the favorite, arguably, if not the overall favorite. But really happy to see that Andretti continues to look strong. Like you said, Colton Herta, always a strong driver on these street courses. Really curious to see how Kyle Kirkwood takes qualifying. If I was him, I'd feel a little bit like a man on a mission to kind of take back the kind of take the penalty into my own hands and put myself in a good position to have a good start of the race, because while we do see overtakes, it's really dicey overtakes, and sometimes it's not completed successfully all the way through the overtake. So um I'm still going back and forth. The everyone watching is gonna have to literally wait to the last moment to see who I'm picking for my pick a winner. But I do think that Polo seems like he's gonna have a better outing this weekend than Dix.
Yeah, I'm thinking Pelo's gonna have a better outing than Scott Dixon. Dixon, you can never count him out, but I think especially in a race where you got the cautions potentially that could help him out. He got a good team, but Palou just has the momentum right now. And of course, we'll be following IndyCar throughout the weekend. We also have NASCAR going on, a unique format tomorrow. After IndyCar, we'll be on the air to wrap up IndyCar F1 and preview NASCAR. To preview Formula One, we're going to go ahead and welcome Mara in. Mara, thank you for joining us today. Let's get started with Formula One, Mara. The big talk, Oscar Piastri has taken the pole over Lando Norris. The two are in the front row. We saw how Piastri ensured Lando could not get a toe, making an aggressive move on the front stretch, breaking the toe, the draft, as we know here in the United States. The two teammates, they're not helping each other out because that championship is still in reach. Lando Norris coming off that win at Monaco. Barcelona, he's going to be starting side by side. And we know you got that long straightaway, then a right-hand corner about 90 degrees, but then a left-hand corner and a right-hand corner again. So if you're side by side exiting that first corner, you could have that preferred line in the next corner, but then that third corner could be the disadvantage. So Mara, starting with you, who is the favorite for the first lap to lead it? And is there any concerns we could see a repeat of what Mercedes did a few years ago, where the two drivers collided with each other here in Barcelona?
I don't think so. It's too early. Tomorrow, I presume Piastri will lead and there will be no crash. Right now, they have to team up against Verstappen that won every single battle against them singularly. McLaren will then decide who's the first driver of the team. Or maybe hope that one of them will make mistakes and removes himself from the battle.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mara. I think it's too early in the season for really unhinged, aggressive behavior between the two teammates. While I do hope that we get to see some battles, but historically we don't get a lot of overtakes in Barcelona. So I think excellent point. They're going to have to work together because speaking of a man on a mission, Max Verstappen, just in the kindest way, a nightmare to have him behind you if you're starting a race. So pretty long into turn one, but not only do I think it's too early in the season, I do think based on Lando and Oscar's personalities that we've seen from them so far, Oscar tends to be the little bit more aggressive one, and so I don't really first I don't see this being the moment where Lando really struts his aggression and shows that he's willing to take some risks to get an overtake done. But yeah, I'm seeing Piastri continue with his lead after the first lap.
I agree with you. I think Oscar Piastri is a driver to be on that first lap. And even if Oscar Piastri, for some reason, has a poor start and side by side, I think he could easily say, okay, I'm going to let Lando go. I'm going to get around him again. The two of them colliding, pulling the same mistake a Mercedes did years ago here at the same track. I don't see that occurring. And of course, Max Verstappen, as you talked about, starting third, right behind the two. He won his first race when the two Mercedes drivers collided with each other. Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton famously taking each other out of the race. George Russell is starting fourth, and Lewis Hamilton in fifth. Best qualifying effort for him, way ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc in seventh. So, Emily, if we have a scenario where you have no McLarens up front, that leaves Verstappen, Russell, and Hamilton, who has the best shot at getting the win?
Really interesting because obviously last year between Lando and Verstappen, Lando had that very focused effort of stopping Max from overtaking him, giving George the opportunity to take that lead on the first lap. Ultimately, Verstappen got the overtake back and went back to take the lead. So um, I think we can see some movement. In theory, if there was no McLarens there, right? This is obviously McLaren's year, but Max is going, one win away from being very much back in the lead of this championship. And it is very close between those three drivers as much as these McLaren cars have been dominating. So he's proven that he doesn't need to have the fastest car. He won in Japan. To have big moments to his benefit. So my money is on Verstappen of those three drivers.
I totally agree. Still, he shows to be the top driver here. He's almost always behind the McLarens, and his strategic view of the race is superior to Russell's. Hamilton has a too slow car to be a threat.
Yeah, I'm thinking that Ferrari just does not have the pace, really. Looking at Verstappen, maybe Russell. Russell, I think, really needs to have that great start, be up front. But Verstappen, I think, has to be the person to watch. It's just going to be a really intense race, of course, because you have all them up towards the front. Everyone's going to be following for them. But towards the back, several people are going to be following Yuki Tsunoda because, unfortunately, qualifying was not good. He is starting 20th, struggling out there today. Now, it was very interesting. F1 TV asked about his future, and I'm thinking already we're talking about his potential future. Of course, we know Liam Lawson was placed after 2 races, no point finishes. Yuki right now, 3 point finishes and 3 finishes outside the points. So I have to ask Mara, could a non-points finish, which mean 4 non-point finishes compared to 3-point finishes, could that start to slide down of confidence for Yuki Tsunoda? I know after the qualifying, he looked very dejected in his post-qualifying interview.
Totally. I was the one of the many hoping Tsunoda would have been called in Red Bull, but I was clearly wrong. He had better results in a VCARB. Red Bull has to explain why Verstappen can perform so good on this Red Bull and others cannot. Now we have a pretty long list of drivers that could not perform on that car, and we can say that it's not for their inability.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mara. I think you would have to have nerves and confidence of steel not to have your confidence start to decline after starting in P20. It seemed that an inability. Obviously, anybody that goes into that second seat is going to struggle. They're not going to be fighting to be or the drivers championship on pace with Max. They're going to be slower than Max Verstappen. That is a given. But being so far down in the field seemed to have been a Williams Lawson ability because he was doing like what Yuki Tsunoda was doing in that V carb. But I'm I'm devastated for Yuki Tsunoda. I'm surprised that he's starting in P20. I thought minimum he would be not the absolute last place driver. He's been getting himself into Q2 if he's not in Q3. So I think I was also listening to the F1 TV commentary this morning, Joe, and I would be incredibly shocked if we start having a discussion of Hadjar or someone else going into that seat replacing Sonoda. I think we give Sonoda the rest of the season to see what he can do in that Red Bull. But it's not good. It's bad.
Yeah, it's not good at all. And I feel it is at that point where you cannot replace Yuki Tsunoda. It just would not make sense. Bring Leon Lawson back in. You got a car that's been worked towards Yuki's liking. Now you're gonna put Liam back in. Put in Isaac Hadjar. We'll be talking about him doing pretty good. You're gonna just throw him in the deep end. None of that makes sense. So overall, I think Red Bull just has to bite the bullet, and this is what we're stuck with, and we got to go with. With that said, time for. So here we go with the first of all the lightning round questions, and this one is going to go over to Emily. Carlos Sainz is starting 18th. Alex Albon 11th on the grid. Do we see Williams outside the points by the end of the race?
Yes, I think both are going to finish outside the points, and the magic that we've seen so far from Williams is not going to be on their side this weekend.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it's going to end as well too. For Fernando Alonso, though, he qualified in Q3. He still has no points at all this season. Mara, does Fernando Alonso finally score his first points of the year?
Yes, hopefully he will. I mean, he has a good car in Barcelona.
I agree. I hope so.
I think it's going to be finally yes. He needs it. Nico Hulkenberg, Gabriel Barrichello, they're starting 16th and 12th respectively. Barrichello has had some good races. Who do you see finishing ahead, Emily?
I see Bortoleto in this scenario. Like I said, not a lot of overtakes historically here. So Bortoleto.
I'll go for Hulkenberg instead.
Ooh, Hulkenberg. I think I might. Oh, this is hard. I might go with Hulkenberg as well too. Now, Red Bull, surprisingly, they are ahead.
Okay.
Red Bull, they're surprisingly ahead of Ferrari in the Constructor Championship by just 1 point. Mara, do they stay ahead or will that change after Barcelona?
Verstappen will score more points than both Ferraris.
Yeah, I think both Ferraris together are going to collect more points than Max is going to by himself. So Ferrari.
I think it's going to be as well too. Same Ferrari. Now, Kimi Antonelli has finished outside the points for the last 2 races. Does he end that streak and finish in the points again, Emily?
Yes. I say confidently. Yeah, I think he's starting in the top 10 if he has a clean race. Totally possible.
Agree. He has a good chance to end that.
And Charles Leclerc is coming off a second place finish, but he starts 7th. Does he have a shot at the podium, Mara?
Drivers know perfectly this track, so I expect no changes in the classification of the start. So
I agree with Mara. I would love to see a Charles podium, but it's not going to be this weekend.
I'm going to make it now. This is not going to be this weekend as well, too. Ferrari's just not exactly having the pace, and so many teams have tested here. They know the track too well. Franco Colapinto, He does not have that much experience on this track. And in fact, very little experience with the Alpine car itself. And right now, 16th and 13th place finish in the two races. The car has had issues, including qualifying, where he was trying to get out to do a second fast lap. Car had issues, was done for the day. So this raises the question: Jack Dohan, of course, he had two retirements, but when you look at the rest of his finish, 13th, which ties what Franco has done for his best, along with 14th, 15th, and 17th, so just one below Franco's worst finish of 16th so far. Emily, is it too early to make a call that replacing Jack Dohan was a mistake or not?
Well, I think regardless of what we think in terms of this, Alpine was going to put Colapinto in this car no matter what this season, unless Doohan was having podiums and winning races. He unfortunately, Alpine had an agenda, and Colapinto was pretty hot stuff at the end of last season. But he is a rookie. I still consider him a rookie. Yes, he had several races under his belt with Williams last year, but he's very much still learning as he kind of had like two ends of the spectrum. He would have these absolute glorious moments for Williams, brilliant moments. And then he would have these like unhinged crashes. So that seems to be again what he's done so far this season. Um, I truly feel for Jack Doohan. I think if he would have had a full season, we could have had a better indicator of how he would perform overall in F1. But yeah, unfortunately, we all, it was like the worst secret. We knew no matter what, Colapinto at some point this year was getting in that Alpine car. It was just not a matter of if, it was when.
I agree. Yeah, too early. But it was also too early when last year everybody called Colapinto a great driver as well. So we really need to give these guys a little bit more time to prove their qualities.
You bring up a good point, Bar. I feel like it used to be okay, you get an F1 ride, you're a rookie, you know you're going to finish that season as a rookie, regardless of how it goes. And sometimes you might have to deal with poor finishes, no finishes at all, crashing out. Now the pressure is there where I just feel like everyone's looking for that next rookie that this rookie's going to win. This rookie is hot stuff. Franco Colapinto, it started off hot, but then the last few races, like, okay, you slid down from a potential opportunity with Red Bull to, well, now you're with Alpine. So it's just something. I'm just saying, it's just overall, I think a lot of pressure now on all these drivers. One of them, I would have to say, has overcome the pressure so far. Isaac Hajar, of course, it's easy to say the best performing rookie right now is Kimi Antonelli. You look at the equipment he has, seventh in the stands, but 10th in the stands. There's where you'll find Isaac Hajar, 4 point finishes, three consecutive Q3 appearances counting today. And considering his first race where he crashed out on the warm up lap, was just devastated. The next race, okay, he finished, but outside the point. But then he has these point finishes. He has these Q3 appearances, and he seems to be smiling on the track. He seems to have that confidence. Mara, is Isaac Hajar the biggest surprise of the year so far?
I think so. Yes, he had such an impressive start of the season. He's in the Q3 every time, basically. I remember last year in F2, he was so emotional. So probably he worked a lot with VCarb to empower his emotional side. And this has also helped him on the track with improving his performances as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mara. I think all of us, like you said, Joe, it's easy to kind of look at Kimmy Antonelli and be impressed with him off of the get-go. Obviously, he had that sprint pole, which was incredibly exciting. But just pulling up Hajar's kind of record so far this season, um, highest finish was sixth in Monaco, eighth in Japan, 10th in Saudi Arabia, ninth in Imola. Whereas with Kimi, he's been 11th in Bahrain, sixth in Saudi Arabia, sixth in Miami, did not finish in Imola, and then obviously there was the Mercedes of it all last weekend in Monaco. So I think bottom line, great to see both of these rookies doing very well in, the pinnacle of the sport. But Hadjar's been extremely consistent. It's been a pleasant surprise, like you said. I too agree with Mara. I think everything that we had heard about him coming from F2, that he was a fiery, emotional driver, and really happy to see that he has overcome that Australian incident. And I'm sure he is very happy to have seen that before as well from himself.
Yeah, he's been a very pleasant surprise, and to overcome what happened in Australia, I thought, okay, this could be the start of a miserable year, just not having anything going right, crashing out. No, he has, considering the environment of Racing Bull, Red Bulls, everything going on with the Yuki Tsunoda, the Liam Lawson, I just feel like he is just focused on bringing the car home in one piece. The races where he hasn't finished in the points, he has still contended. Just strategy didn't work out, or just a car wasn't up to pace. So overall, I think he has been a very big surprise. Now, of course, once again, before we do pick a winner, Oscar Piastri on the pole. When you look at his record, he has quite a good number of race wins from the pole. But one thing that stood out with this pole, McLaren, they've gotten, of course, the last 3 poles in a row. But some of the races they have not won or taken the pole, Japan and Imola. Japan, very high speed track. Excuse me, Imola, Piastri did get a pole, but Verstappen led the first lap and the rest of the race. Japan, very high speed track. Sweeping corners. Max Verstappen was just on another level race day. Imola, Verstappen had that better first corner. This is an older F1 track. Some sweeping corners, but not a lot. And the big thing, it was much narrow. Max Verstappen dominated that race. Spain, Emily, has these sweeping high-speed corners like Japan, much wider though. Could Max Verstappen win on pace against the McLarens if the McLarens have no trouble, and along with pace, the strategy as well?
If the McLarens have no trouble, it's going to take a Max Verstappen overtake on lap 1 or lap 2. I really don't see a scenario where the McLarens are not working together, as Mara has suggested. I don't see them not working together to build a gap and to manage the pace of the race. If Max is caught behind dirty air, I really don't see him getting it done on pace. But Max, Mad Max, um, will do unhinged things to take the lead. So I think the start of the race potentially is going to be the most interesting moment and thing to be watching. But Mara, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. Plus, I in Suzuka and Imola, we saw Red Bull really good also in qualifying on the Friday. Yesterday, Red Bull was not that good. They had to work a lot on the car to get together this lap today. So I do not feel that Verstappen tomorrow will have the possibility to challenge directly the McLarens. And therefore, if they do not make mistakes or do something with the strategy, they will go Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen.
Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, that'll be very interesting. Of course, Formula One, that'll be tomorrow morning, kicking off the race day. Formula One, INDYCAR, then we'll be on there to wrap it all up and preview NASCAR tomorrow. Before we do that, it's time for Pick a Winner. Looking at the leaderboard, this is before the Formula E race. We know the Formula E race. There's been some updates. Max Gunther took that win earlier today, but very tight. Matthew Bro leading Kobe and Matt White by 1 point. Tanner's up there just in 22 points behind, and we got 26 people on the leaderboard. Of course, Mara, you got Lando Norris the last time. So starting with Formula One. For Formula One, Mara, who do you see winning over at Barcelona, the Spanish Grand Prix?
Piastri.
And a really hot battle between me and Kiska. So I'm going also with Oscar Piastri in hopes that I can get an overtake myself this weekend.
Piastri's really good. I think I got to make it unanimous. I don't see why he can't get it done. Oscar Piastri is going to win at Barcelona. Now we switch to INDYCAR. All right, for INDYCAR, they're at Detroit. You got some of the favorites, of course, Colton Herta, Alex Palou, Scott Dixon, the Penske drivers, Will Power, Scott McLaughlin. When it comes to the IndyCar race in Detroit, who do you think is going to win over in Detroit?
I leave it to you, honestly. I don't know.
Emily.
I'll step in. I would love to see an Andretti driver take the win because they are looking like they have pace. However, last week when I was like, I really don't think that Alex Palou is going to get this done this year at the 500, I was quickly proven wrong. So I'm going to go with probably a safe guess and say Alex Palou.
I'm thinking the safe guess, and this will be our pick, Mara. Alex Palou being the safe guess.
I trust you guys.
I mean,
Palou for me as well.
Alex Palou, he's won every race except one. So it's like, well, I mean, it'll be a surprise if Alex Palou doesn't win the race. So it will be interesting to see how it all shapes up. And in the chat room, I see Adam has shared his pick winners from Formula E Race 2. Oliver Rowland, Spain, he's going with Lando Norris, IndyCar, Alex Palou. So
okay,
unanimous, all four of us going Alex Palou. And we thank everyone for tuning into our program. Big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin Show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month through Patreon. Link in the video description. Of course, YouTube super chat, super thanks, and buy me a coffee is another option for supporting us here in the Grid Network. And the simplest way, just hit the like button, thumbs up, subscribe to us right here on YouTube, and find us across social media at gridnetworktv.com. And of course, Grid Ranking, Grid Endurance, and pick a winner, gridnetworktv.com. You will see Matthew Bros race recap later on in the weekend. Of course, yesterday we were on the air for Women Motorsports, Emily, myself, and Ben. Check that out. Tomorrow we're back on the air for the Grid Life wrap-up and NASCAR pre-race show. Monday, Ben will be back on the air with Brand for a Motor Monday edition of Grid Encore. Wednesday, Grid Tonight with Kobe Lambeth, Joshua Birch, and Matt White, the latest Grid Endurance Performance Index. And we do this all over again next race weekend. For Mara and Emily, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time and enjoy the race.